My name's David Gullion. I was asked to relate how and why I became a Muslim. I'm also the author of the book, The Last Christian. In answering this question, I probably need to begin by saying why I was dissatisfied with my background and the belief system that I grew up with, how I reacted to this, why I then investigated Islam, what I found in Islam that made me become a Muslim, and how I feel that Islam has answered the questions and quest that I was on. Okay, my parents were Christian missionaries for 50 years, and as people, they were about the best possible people you could find. And it was like their beliefs, their lifestyle, the things they did. It'd be very difficult to criticize them as individuals. They were honest, upright, decent sort of people. Now, as far as religious faith, this led to a problem for me, and here's the problem. If one reads, say, the Gospels, we find that Jesus said that what you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. And Jesus was also asked, once he said, he told people they should take care of their neighbors. And somebody asked him, who is your neighbor? And he gave a parable about a man who had been attacked by robbers, and he was left for dead, and a stranger came by and took care of him, even though this man was an outcast, for that society. Okay, now, where this related is I grew up in the 60s, and as a young man or teenager, you had things like the independence movement for many Asian countries, African countries. In the U.S., you had the civil rights movement. Now, my parents, but not just them, but essentially the whole religious community, they were against things such as the '64 civil rights movement. And they took the side of the colonials against like colonial type of people. And to me, it just didn't seem to square the idea that Jesus said the way you treat someone else is the way that God will relate to you, and you're to take care of your brother and that sort of thing. So this made me begin to ask questions. An example, I asked this one lady, I said, what's wrong with this '64 civil rights movement? She says, well, using the terms today, African Americans already have their civil rights. Well, to me that wasn't an answer, because obviously if somebody already has something and you do something to make them happy, why should there be any question or whatever? Well, anyway, growing up, these sort of things made me move away from my background. So say between my middle to late teens and 30s, I moved away from this background. By my middle to late 30s, I began to explore, who am I, where I fit into the world. At 8 months of age, my family moved to the Philippines. So from 8 months of age to 16 and a half, I grew up in the Philippines, and then we came to the United States. Okay, part of my quest was to understand the world in which I live. 1 in every 5 people in the world, or about that number, are Muslims. So it's logical that someone who wants to understand the world, or where they fit in, or learn more, should explore communities, certainly one so large. Okay, now what this led directly to was I knew an acquaintance who knew a man who was Muslim, and he suggested that I come to a mosque in Houston, and there would be somebody there who would discuss Islam with me. So in late October of '95, which is Ramadan, I came to a mosque in Houston, and Dr. Alam was there, and he began discussing Islam by showing similarities between, say, Islam and Christianity. And during the conversation, I only remember responding a few times. Like once he mentioned how, say, Jeremiah, the 8th chapter of Jeremiah, the Bible itself says that it has been changed or edited, or if you want to use the term, falsified. And I pointed out that scholars believe that Mark, for instance, has been changed or redacted at least 3 times. He also then began talking about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and I pointed out that the community of Yarib asked him to mediate between them precisely because they believed that he was a prophet. And the third thing I remember asking was, he was talking about Prophet Muhammad being a prophet and how God that inspired him to preach a message to first his local community and then a message for the whole world. And so I just simply asked him, says, is the Prophet Muhammad a prophet as a prophet is defined by the Bible? And he said, yes. Well, I didn't doubt his sincerity, but I personally didn't believe that was so, though I knew that the Torah had proofs of prophet, but I wasn't exactly sure what they were. But I guess cultural conditioning, I didn't believe he would be a prophet as defined by the Bible. So what I did was I went home, took my time, looked them up, and then I began investigating Prophet Muhammad. To my utter surprise, Prophet Muhammad is a prophet as defined by the Bible. Now that got me interested. Before that, I really wasn't going, that interested, was not going to listen. I then contacted the man who first suggested I go down to the mosque and talk about Islam, and he gave me 2 translations of the Quran. And in a 2-week time, I read both translations. I read one translation and the other translation, and I would compare to the Bible. And the more I read, the more, you might say, conviction or compulsion I felt to become a Muslim. When I would read the Quran and then I would read the Bible, things that I did not understand. For instance, I knew a lot of knowledge or information about the Bible, but once I began reading the Quran, I could read the Bible, and a lot of things that were not clear became clear. I was able to organize information that I knew. Everything, when I investigated, made me decide that I have to become a Muslim. But I says, well, if I can find just one good reason not to become a Muslim, I will not become a Muslim. So I spent several months, and I could not find a single reason not to become a Muslim. Everything that I read, all my investigation indicated this was the way to go, this was the thing to do. Over the ages, humanity has tried many schemes to make the world better in ways that they would define the world, and they've all failed. The only scheme is one that is from God and inspired by God, which is essentially the message of all the prophets, which is that you essentially have to have a God-centered life, and then you show or prove it because you take care of your fellow human beings, and that is what Islam is about. And if one compares this to the alternative, then what one will have is a constant cycle of, say, violence and cruelty. So essentially that's my belief. Also, if one thinks of it, it's no more of a miracle that you have another existence as opposed to this one. This one is no more miraculous than the fact that you'll have another one. And if somebody wants God's approval, God's acceptance, or if you want to use the Christian terms, God's grace or favor, then you should try to follow God's order and God's plan. And God's plan is to make God the center of your life and take every fellow human being. And that is essentially what I believe, and that is what Islam has done for me, and that is where my search has led me. That's basically it. The number one thing that I find in Islam is the idea of community. And what I mean by community, the alternative is to have a dysfunctional community. That essentially is what it is. If there's to be any, as they say, this is like the Christmas season, Christians say peace on earth, goodwill towards men. If there's to be peace on earth, goodwill towards men, it is only by following Islam, submitting one's will to God, or in other words, make God the center of your life, and then show it or prove it by taking care of your fellow human being. Yes, in other words, it's I'm happy to be a Muslim, or put another way, there's no alternative except to be a Muslim, unless you want to have strife and discord, because that's the value that you get from Islam. Okay, my message to say fellow Americans, fellow humans, is if somebody, for example, looks at the Constitution of the United States, the goals of Islam square exactly with being a good American, or as the preamble would say, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure for ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, we do establish or ordain the Constitution of the United States. That's essentially, there's nothing in contradiction with that and being Muslim. In fact, as a Muslim, you're essentially ordered or directed, this is what you do in whatever country you live in. So if somebody wants my message about being an American and Muslim, that's what I tell them, because that's essentially what the faith is about. Okay, the basis of being of God-centeredness is that you take care of your fellow human being, and the whole purpose of Islam is to accomplish this. If something does not accomplish or promote this goal, it may be done by people who call themselves Muslims, but they have no more claim to being Muslims as a Muslim who's following Islam than would somebody claims to be a follower of Jesus who engages in violence. Because that's not what the prophets taught. The prophets taught to make God the center of your life, and then you prove it or by trying to take care of your fellow human being or show that this is what you are doing.